Hello, welcome back to the Theolayisades house. We are again in a new place. We're sitting at our kitchen counter, got all cozy. It's late in the evening because I worked late tonight. And we today are going to be talking about why to not get a dog in the first year of marriage, which might sound strange to some people, especially animal lovers out there or people who already have dogs. But this is something that we wanted to talk about when we were talking about things to talk about, because we have seen quite a few people do this and regret it, and even have some bad outcomes or not great outcomes. And also, we just have some thoughts that we'd like to share because we bought a dog in our first year of marriage. Roughly how many months in? How long have we been married when we bought Pepper?
I think about 6 months in, something like that.
Yeah, so we got married in November of 2021. Pepper was born in February of 2022, and I can't remember the day we got her. I'm obviously not a very knowledgeable dog person, but there's obviously a time in which they need to spend with their mother. And so we got her maybe a few months after that. So I think maybe around May.
Yeah, that sounds right.
May.
You usually get pups around 8 weeks, like minimum of 8 weeks.
Oh, okay. So that's 2 months. Why am I so bad at calculating? I'm tired. January, February, March, April, May. So maybe April, May. Okay, yeah. So maybe like 6 months, something like that. Where was I going with that? So, anyways, early on in our marriage, early-ish on, it definitely in the first year of our marriage, we got her. And are a couple of reasons why we think that it probably is not the best idea. Again, obviously everybody has their own circumstance and things like that, but these are the reasons why we think that maybe hold off a little bit longer if you're considering it and you're newly married, and not necessarily, and we were talking about like first year of marriage, but even just like newly married, getting used to each other, settling in type deal. So the first kind of reason, there is a little bit of financial investment that you have to put into getting a dog. Depending on the dog you're getting, it's obviously going to be different. So first, it depends on the breed you get. If you're going to get something from a shelter, or if you're going to get like a backyard breeder, somebody who like accidentally had puppies, and obviously that's going to be cheaper, and obviously that sometimes can be controversial, whatever. That's not really what we're here to discuss. And then there's obviously like breeders, they've been doing it for a long time. They may have AKC papers, stuff like that. Designer dogs, especially, even higher. So yeah, I can't remember. We talked about several different dogs. What do you remember us talking about, like different dog breeds? What was important for us when we were looking at like thinking maybe we should get a dog
Well,
in
I,
terms of breed? Sorry.
I remember thinking that, well, in terms of breed, I didn't really have one in mind, but we were trying to get a dog on a budget. That was for sure. We didn't want to spend a lot of money. Susie's family, they already had dogs before. I never had a dog before, so I didn't really know as much. But yeah, Susie's family, they previously had golden doodles, which is a cross between a golden retriever and a poodle. And she she had a good experience, wanted to get something similar. So I think that was pretty much our direction, was to try and get a golden doodle.
Yeah, I think so. I think we looked at a lot of different dogs. I kind of wanted a dog that was smaller because we don't have that much space in our house, so, or like our backyard. We have like a decently sized backyard, but a lot of it is like brick and flower beds, and it's not the most dog friendly per se. But so I was thinking more like smallish, medium-ish. I'd looked at like Australian shepherds because they can be,
Okay.
or I don't know. I'm so bad at this, but like some of the shepherds that are smaller and then realize like they have way too much energy.
Sure, well, the Aussies are herders, so that they may like near people's heels a little bit to get them moving in a certain direction. And they also, I think the Aussies are shedders as well. And
True.
I've got asthma, and we wanted to keep a kind of a tidier house. So we're trying to look for a dog with a little bit less mess and maybe a little less of an allergy profile. Is hypoallergenic. It doesn't mean they won't trigger allergies. It means they're just less likely to.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, the budget being wanting like a more budget friendly dog, there are some people who are, that's a controversial topic, but that was something that we are looking for because we weren't necessarily, mega rich when
Yeah,
we got married or anything. So again, we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss other things. But again, like I said, depending on what breed you get, it can go from anywhere to like, I don't know what most shelters like charge. I think some shelters maybe charge like a rehoming fee of like $50, $100, maybe 200, something like that.
hmm
And you might be able to find a dog on like Craigslist or someplace like that for even cheaper. I don't know if I would recommend that cheap because you don't know. That's like, I don't know. But or sometimes you can even find a dog for free, like free to a good home type of a deal, or if you know somebody who's, maybe different life circumstances, they can't keep their dog. So that would be like the cheapest you like circumstance or situation where you could find a dog. But designer dogs can go to like thousands of dollars, especially if you're
True.
getting those like very well known breeder, AKC papers, where they know like their great grandparents and
hmm
all of that, and they're a very highly sought after dog, or maybe a more rare dog, or maybe a dog that's bred more in like not the US. If you live in the US or wherever you live in that area, they can get really expensive. So that would be obviously a very big investment, and then you have to think about all the different things. If you don't have a crate or
hmm
if you don't have a dog, but they seem little, but they do add up like
Yep.
really fast. And especially if like your dog is from far, was bred somewhere else, and you have to fly it to you and maybe have someone transport it.
hmm
Buying all those, initial things if they're still really young, getting their additional vaccines and things like that.
Yep.
So there's definitely a pretty big initial cost. And we knew that, we knew that there was going to be like an initial investment of getting the different things. But I don't think we really thought much about like, you still have to pay a decent amount of money for a thing is going to offend some people, being, or I don't know, what do you say, creature?
A pet.
A pet that, and you mentioned this like for a someone else in your house that's not contributing much besides maybe like some happiness. And that that might be offend people, but if your dog is not a working dog, like you better really like them because they're not doing anything else really except existing. And there are other, people love dogs and they love dogs for many other reasons besides working. But the expenses can add up. I feel like we talked about this, right? Like,
Yeah, we did.
we're, buying dog food so much, and like dog food is actually pretty expensive.
Yeah, it's spendy. I mean, I know you have some numbers you want to share, but even we've spoken about, God forbid something happens to Pepper, our dog, you know, how much vet fees are we prepared to pay, and at what point do we just call it quits, and, it's not a big number. I mean, I don't think I even have a number in my head, but, you know, go into debt or we spend thousands of dollars to keep, our dog alive, if she is terminally sick. These are good conversations to have. If you are a person who would want to do whatever possible to keep your pet alive. You could be spending money in chemotherapy bills, radiation, like all those cancer treatments that they do for human
Or
beings.
insulin or
They
blood
do for dogs as
pressure.
well. So and maybe you could get pet insurance, but a pet is a luxury. And it could take money out
Yeah,
of your pocket that you
that's
don't want to
what
spend.
that's what I was trying to think of. You said something that like kind of struck me that is very true, but I don't think people think of it that way, especially in America. And this is different other countries, but in America, I feel like having a pet is so common that it's almost seen as like a household staple, which sounds funny, but it really is a luxury because you're paying a lot of, or you can potentially pay for a lot of money for something that's not providing something back to you, which there are a lot of things in life, which I think in first world country, first world problems, like people would say, we do pay for a lot of luxuries that are sometimes seen as they are like a must, but they're really a need. I mean, sorry, they're an, they are seen as a need, but they're really a want. They're not a need. And we could go deep, very deep into that conversation. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, it can, the cost can be a decent amount. I pulled up a few numbers just really quick, and this is not by any means like the amount of money that total amount of money we spent on pepper, but I looked up like the things that we buy, like food, vitamins, conditioner, shampoo, like some vet bills. Poodles are prone to ear infections, and so Pepper has had some ear infections. We've had to treat with the medication, ear drops, and I think it was like maybe over a couple months, it was about $200, and I calculated a very, very, very rough estimation of food, and it was about $650 a year, which sounds like not that much, but like I said, if you're like living really, really slim, trying to live slim and have a lot of other debts and stuff, like it is something to take into account. It can add up, and we try to take care of Pepper the best we can. However, we do not feed her a raw food diet.
No.
We don't take her to the vet every month. She's pretty healthy, thank God. So we don't have to. But some animals can get very spendy, because some animals, they break out and, all this crazy stuff happens if they don't eat a raw meat diet or get taken to the vet every month or every couple of weeks or, like you said, have a bunch of medications. But yeah, she's still money. She still costs money. And I would say she's more on the low end of things. And what that has to do with marriage, like you mentioned earlier, is that if you have not talked about, if you come from two different homes where, like, for example, you didn't have a pet growing up, pets
Nope.
are not really, I feel like, I don't know if, tell me if this is right or correct me if I'm wrong. Is it more like the UK side that's not really having pets, or like the Nigerian culture that you guys don't really have pets, or which part, or both?
Well, actually, I think it was actually both for where we lived because we lived in the UK. We lived in the city, a very like built up area. So nobody had a big backyard. Nobody had all the houses are small. You've been there. It's all terraced houses, like one house after the other after the other. So you don't really have a lot of space for yourself, let alone a pet. So that's like more the UK side. On the Nigerian side, they're not really big into pets at all. They see dogs more as working animals, and you might have a guard dog, you might have like a dog that looks after your animals, but it seemed, at least for my dad, he found it pretty strange. People would want to live with a dog, or have a dog in their bed, or have a dog, in their handbag. So yeah, I didn't really have much exposure to pets, and I didn't even. It was only when I came over here that I really thought of having one in my home.
Yeah, and I remember when we met, you did not like dogs at all. You were even like a little bit afraid, I think you told me.
Mm,
So definitely you've changed a lot because I feel like you even more are more of a dog person than I am
yeah.
now after getting Pepper. Um, yeah, so going back, if you have come from different households where I grew up with like dogs my whole life, you didn't grow up with any, and then all of a sudden, say you've both decided to get a dog or whatever, but you haven't talked about like this dog, we're going to do everything to this will be like my child. And we are going to do everything we can possibly do to keep this dog alive till its very last day.
Mm,
Or you come from a place where it's like and like I said, these are very two different views on animals. And I'm not saying where what place I want, but like, so you're on the other extreme of like, if our dog, if like my family is more important than the dog, like, and if it's the family or the dog, like the dog's gonna go type of a deal.
well,
And like you're on two different areas, like say even just like in expenses, like we'll say like just in the financial aspect of it, then there's going to be like a lot of contention
sure.
that there's already like a decent amount of possible scenarios for contention in a new marriage
Mm,
that are that you're not able to avoid.
sure.
At
Sure.
least if you live in the way that we do, in which we believe that you don't live together until after you're married. So you're getting used to somebody who's so you're not used to. You have so many different things that you're getting used to, like how you want, if you want the dishes out of the sink by the end of the night, or if you don't care. Things
Sure.
like that. Little things, big things. But like, and like I said, some of them you're unable to avoid.
Hmm.
But when you add like something that you could have avoided until like pushed off
Hmm.
until later, I think that maybe that's not the best thing.
Yeah, I think some things it's hard to know before you know, right? Like if you've never had a roommate before, you've never been in a relationship before, you've never been married before. I mean, I guess that's what we're talking about. You might not anticipate the the growing together process that marriage is. It's with the first 6 months, the first year. You're having to learn the other person. There's going to be a little bit of friction, right? You're two independent people who are now becoming one, in many ways, but practically that's chores, that's finances, that's how you're managing your time. And a dog is going to start bleeding into some of those things, like, oh, I need to go walk the dog. That's time we could have spent doing something else as a couple, or it's time for us to spend money at the vet. That's money that could have maybe gone somewhere else. So on top of you already will have things that you're working through as a young married couple, and the dog may be just an additional thing on the list that I don't know. Maybe it's part of your growth. I mean, we have a dog. We're not going to get rid of it, but things may have been easier without it.
Yeah. And that's a good point is that say you do have all, say you're not hurting for money, but there is, if you want to be a good steward, that's what I'm looking for, of this dog that you got,
Mm,
you're going to have to spend some time. And again, you're in that first year of marriage, you're adjusting to a lot of things. You're adjusting to each other's schedules.
mm,
One might work a night shift, the other day shift. One might, have like to be out of the house at the gym for like an hour and a half
mm,
previously. And then now that they're married, if they did, they wouldn't see their wife because they have weird work schedule. I don't know, different circumstances, but time is, a commodity that
sure.
is and time is very, very valuable commodity in marriage, especially early marriage when you're trying to build a good foundation. And if you're just locking your dog in a kennel, in a crate or whatever, just like ignoring them, then that comes to another point that I want to talk about is maybe you can afford it, but like you can't like financially, but you can't afford it like your time. You
Mm.
don't you could get it, but you maybe shouldn't get it for the fact that either you're going to spend a lot of time with the dog where you should have been spending time with your spouse.
Yeah.
And people might say like, "Oh, well, why does that make a difference like later in marriage?" It's like, well, it might not if you're just not good at learning. You're still learning even later in marriage. And in that first year, after the first year, you're still learning. But I think that first year or like that first newlywed stage is like where you're learning like a lot of things of how to balance times and schedules. And we're still doing it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost 2 years in, and there's still lessons being learned, daily or weekly for sure. Um, so I mean, you are a dog is a good thing potentially, but there's a chance you're going to hate that dog. I mean, and maybe we should get to that part. As you're growing together, if that dog, even if it may seem silly, but you may feel like that dog is getting in between you, and then I mean, I think we encountered that, and maybe Susie can talk about that a little bit, but you know, I think at some point you want to have thought about that before you got the dog. Like how important is this dog to us? Like if we feel like this dog is not helping our relationship, what are we going to do about it?
That is a good point. Um, like if you've I guess gone against our recommendation and gotten a dog, then what's your contingency plan? That's a conversation you need to have with your spouse because yeah, for sure. I think when we first got Pepper, she was naughty. And it got me really upset because she would like destroy things that before like I wouldn't have to worry about being destroyed.
Yeah,
And then, if you have that like built up frustration and anger, you have to be careful to not take it out on the other person, but
sure.
it could be easy to do that. And as I was saying in the past is there are things in marriage that are already going to happen that will cause frustration and anger that you have the temptation to take out on your spouse
Yeah,
and you hope that you don't, but maybe you shouldn't add to that like
yeah,
for things that are causing frustration and anger. And that could be mitigated by sending your dog to like dog school or whatever you call it, or like getting a more senior dog or something. But
sure.
it's just a thing to consider. Also, you have to think about the fact that like if your dog is this super needy dog and they're like trying to be attached to you at all times, and it's like I'm trying to be like attached at the hip to with my spouse, like try to be really close to them and stuff.
Hmm.
And maybe that's getting between you two, or maybe they're whining all night and you can't even like think
Sure. Well,
past them whining all night or
that's
something.
one thing I learned about myself. I mean, I guess I kind of knew it, but I realized when we got a dog is that I'm a warrior. So like if I hear Pepper whining at night, I'm gonna be up all night probably. And I'm an easy sleeper. I can sleep anywhere. And it's distracting, Even like say we lock her up in her kennel, we just want it to be time for the two of us, and she's whining. I'm gonna be distracted in the time that's just the two of us. And we trained her, and like she doesn't, she's a good dog. She sleeps all night, say, soundly. Rarely, very rarely whines or, annoys us. You know, um, but I remember that actually I told Susie at times like, I'm sorry I'm distracted right now because I can hear the dog in the background. And that's, I think you can kind of see where we're going like that. As a young couple, is not something you want to be dealing with.
Yeah. Um, and these are all things that you might have already considered, but there are things that I think a lot of people don't consider if they maybe their parents were the ones who got the dog when they were young and trained them and they were the one who suffered through it, but they didn't really like necessarily complain about it, or maybe you just brush it off, or maybe your parents never had a dog so you don't even know. but I think a lot of people rush into it without really thinking about the fact that like all these things. Yeah. I think one thing that really was on my mind a lot too when we were considering talking about this was I've seen, and this is nothing against people who this happens because again, it's probably they didn't have any advice about it, but I've seen people get dogs after they're newly married. I think I think it's not, it naturally comes, I believe, from, you're excited, you're getting married, you are excited to start your home together, to be together as a family,
Mm-hmm.
and you want like something, like you see it almost like the white picket fence type ideal of like,
Uh-huh.
oh, okay, now we're going to get our dog and his name's going to be Spot and he's going to greet me at the door. And then he's going to just fade into the background and I'm not going to know about him while I see my spouse and greet them. Yeah, that's not usually how it works, but like I think people sometimes like get excited about that and so then they do that and then they realize, oh wait, this is like way too much.
Mm.
And I've seen people like hand off their dogs to other people like almost right after they got them because
Sure.
of the disillusionment. Is that a word? I
Well,
don't
it
know.
works for me.
You know what I mean. And I feel like in those circumstances, it was fine. The dogs were well taken care of and they were good dogs for the families that took them on. But, it would be sad to see that they didn't go to good families or they went to the pound or whatever. You know what I mean? Not to point fingers or make anybody guilty if that happened to them. Because I think we even considered like, is this the right thing for us?
You sure
We
did.
like were. It was mostly me. I'm just gonna confess. It was mostly me. I was very frustrated. I think uh, again with the like the ideal. Bam was not working at first when we
Mm-hmm.
got married because he couldn't. He didn't have his work permit, because he's not a citizen. He immigrated here, and I was thinking like, oh, I feel bad that Bam's home alone all the time. I want to get him the dog, and he's gonna be like friends with the dog. And then when I get home, the dog is just gonna like magically disappear. Then I'm gonna be his friend, best friend. And then we got the dog, and then I realized I am not really a dog person. I like dogs and I like animals, but then I think I'm the type that like, oh, okay, go to your owner, because sometimes I'm tired of you. Which I take care of Pepper. I like to give her the bath, when we bathe her and stuff, and I like to get her. I often am the one grooming her and things like
Yeah.
that, and I like that, but I think it was a stressful time already because there were circumstances which maybe we'll discuss in a different podcast,
Mm-hmm.
revolving around work and me being the person working. It wasn't as if like, oh, I was stressed out because I was the only one working, but it was just certain job circumstances. So I was already really kind of stressed at that time. I was commuting really far.
Yeah.
And when I came home, I didn't want to just, discover the destruction that she had caused and then see my husband. And it's nothing against you. I think it was just that she was really kind of crazy, going off to her and, being distracted. It was that you weren't like neglecting or anything. I don't want to make it seem that way. But it was distracting, when she's,
Yeah.
being crazy puppy like puppies are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's don't underestimate having a puppy. I mean, like you said, maybe a lot of people have had puppies, but it was their parents looking after it or their siblings looking after it. When it's you and that puppy alone, it's not easy. If you try to train them to pee and poop outside, and it's not working, so they're peeing and pooping in your house, and you're the one that has to clean it up,
Mm-hmm.
or you're trying to get him to sleep by himself at night. You
Or
know,
even just like, we wanted to train her even more than that. We wanted to be
sure,
like an obedient dog. Try to train her to stay and to lie down and I mean, they're not that advanced, but wanted to do even more. We wanted her to be like manageable if other people came over, and like we didn't want her to knock over a grandma and like break someone's hip because that happens.
sure.
And I'm in surgery, so I'm always thinking of the worst possible outcome of people, but and circumstances. But anyways, yeah. So like there was a lot of time involved in like wanting to train her, and like that was a lot of effort. And she's a good dog. She's not perfect, but it was a lot of work even to get her where she is now.
True. Maybe we should here are some tips if you decide to get a dog anyways and you get a puppy. It's worth the investment to train them, and even if you have to spend money at a trainer, it's well worth it. And we didn't spend money on a trainer, but we watch a ton of videos.
I thought we're trying to
Um,
dissuade people to
I
get
mean, some people are going to do it
I'm just
anyways.
kidding. Or if
So
you're, not in the stage that we're talking
yeah, I
about.
mean, say you already have the dog, and you're like, you know, we don't know where you are, but it's well worth it. I mean, getting a dog to just listen. I think that a lot of the frustration was the dog doesn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go to your kennel or let go of that rug or let go of my shoes that you're tearing apart. It's like it's important that a dog knows that because the more it only takes them to destroy one thing too many, and you're getting rid of that dog because it's just costing you too much, either financially or
Yeah.
even sentimentally.
Don't give your dogs stuffed animals as a dog toy.
He's sending indirect messages.
No, I'm just
I,
kidding.
I bought Pepper
I'm just
some
kidding.
stuffed dog toys, and I
Well, and
did
it wasn't
not.
your fault because they were labeled as dog
They all label,
toys.
and
The
a lot of people
problem,
use them.
the problem is they look identical to stuffed animals. So whenever we bring her over to visit my mom's house, who has a lot of toys, kids' toys, because she has a lot of grandchildren, she sees what looks like a dog toy, so you can't really blame her. But I would say that would be my one of the tips that I would say is like don't if you don't want your dog to destroy a certain thing, don't buy a toy that looks like that thing because then they won't know the difference. And it'll be very confusing for them to say like, no, you can't chew that, but oh yeah, you can chew this. It just looks almost the same.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely training is definitely important. So yeah, so basically that's kind of covered what I wanted to talk about and what I felt like were the most important tips. And to recap was it can be hard financially,
Yeah.
especially, when you're starting out and you're young, you got married young or whatever, and you maybe just got out of college or whatever your circumstances are. It could be hard because of the time commitment.
Yep. For sure.
It can be really hard because of the emotional investment and you have to put into the dog where you could have been putting that into your spouse, which I guess goes hand in hand with the time thing. And then
Yeah.
finally, or basically to round it all off, is like our reasonings might seem silly or like not really good reasons, but the reasoning behind those reasonings is that your marriage is something that is very, very valuable and something that the enemy of our soul wants to destroy.
That's true.
And so, but like, we want everything in our power to try and preserve. So, though it might seem silly, it's coming from a place like anything that we can do to try and give someone a tip that might make it a little bit easier in that, those formidable years, I would say, of marriage, we would hope that we can give because there are so many things out there that are just trying to tear you down, that will try to tear you down, that are going to try and get between you and your spouse. And you really need to be careful because, it might seem like small little things, but small things can snowball. And you want to start with good habits of putting God first, of course, putting each other first, and putting your marriage as the priority. Obviously, the number one relationship that is priority in your life should be you and God's. But after that, it should be you and your spouse, no one else, nothing else.
Yeah.
So it seems extreme, but that's kind of the reason I would say.
Yeah. I'm with Susie with everything that you said. Yeah, I think it's never it's like you said, it's not too small. I think to think about like having a pet. I think the more you value something, the more you want to protect it. So I think that's where we're coming from. Like if you truly value your marriage, you will seek to protect it. You know, even if it seems that from a little thing or a big thing, you know, small things can turn into big things. So
Yeah. And we're not against dogs. We think dogs are good, crazy, interesting creatures and used for so many different things. But they're like a child that never grows up. That is just like a 2-year-old for the rest of their life. So be prepared for that.
yeah, good luck, you guys thinking about getting dogs. Pray about it. How about that? We didn't talk about prayer, but it was in the back of my mind. That's probably a good option too.
And yeah, pray about all things and all things be prayerful.
All right.
So
Thanks for
yeah,
joining us.
yeah, let us know if you already have a dog. Did you get a dog in your first year of marriage? If you are married, have you thought about it? Has it gone good or bad? Thoughts, ideas for future podcasts. Let us know.
Let us know.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice.